Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. President Trump has threatened to sue the BBC for $1 billion over the controversial edit of one of his speeches. Another migrant removed to France under the government's one-in, one-out scheme has returned to the UK on a small boat. And Sky News understands the International Olympic Committee, under its new president, is moving towards a blanket ban on transgender women from women's sport. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror columnist, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist, Sarah Vine. Lovely to see both of you. Great to see you back, Sarah, as well. So let's take a look at the front pages then, shall we? Let's start with the Telegraph, which broke the story of concerns within the BBC that the editing of Donald Trump's January the 6th speech had been mishandled, has the simple headline, Trump to sue BBC for $1 billion. The Metro leads with what it calls a $1 billion battle. The $1 billion legal threat also appears on the front of the Sun, Beeb's $1 billion bungle, they say. The Financial Times quotes Mr. Trump's lawyers, claiming that he has been defamed by the broadcaster. The Eye suggests that if the US president gets that $1 billion payout, it could put the future of the licence fee in jeopardy. The Daily Mail leads with Trump tells BBC, grovel or I'll sue you for $1 billion. The Guardian claims that BBC board member Robbie Gibb, who was Downing Street Director of Communications under Theresa May, has played a leading role in pressing the corporation's leaders to tackle allegations of bias in its coverage of Mr. Trump's presidency, as well as the conflict in Gaza and the debate over trans rights. The Times also covers the $1 billion legal threat if the BBC does not say sorry. The Star poses Donald Trump as Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movies, demanding $1 billion. And the Mirror finally leading with Prince William on Kate's cancer battle. So let's bring in Kevin and Sarah. Nearly a clean sweep, apart from your paper. But Sarah, let's take a look at the Daily Telegraph, which kicked off, and for them, you know, it's a week of coverage, isn't it?
Yes, their headline is wrong because if they apologise by Friday, then he apparently won't sue. So he may not sue them. But, I mean, this is quite a big moment for the BBC. I mean, the BBC has been sued before. I mean, he was sued famously by Cliff Richard when it filmed the police raid on his house. Interestingly, the person who was involved in that is Jonathan Munro, who has just been appointed as the interim head of news at the BBC, something that's been raising quite a few eyebrows because a lot of people feel that he is part of the problem. But this is a huge, huge problem for the BBC because if they are sued for $1 million...
Or billion even.
A billion, sorry. I don't really understand what $1 billion looks like, but a lot of money. Who's going to pay? It's going to be the British taxpayer, isn't it?
9 zeros.
Is it 9 zeros?
I think the BBC's income is about £3.5 billion from the licence fee, so,
right, so
$1 billion is
that per annum?
Would be a fair chunk. I'd say bring it on. I would love to see Donald Trump in the High Court. One, if you're going to sue for defamation, you have to have a reputation to lose. He hasn't. And then secondly, we're talking about a 12, 15-second clip, which they got wrong, and they should have had the two bits, you know, a bit of light in the front, or so he later said. But I think it still stands. He was impeached in the US for inciting a coup attempt. So I can't see what grounds he has. But what I find interesting on this with the Telegraph is they've been campaigning against the BBC. They were approvingly quoting Trump family members attacking them, and the White House and Trump himself. This is more factual. Certainly inside. I don't know about pages 4, 5, 6 and 7, which they have also got on page 50 in their editorial content. But I just wonder if they now fear there's going to be a backlash because however much the BBC got this wrong, and they got that wrong, it doesn't make Trump innocent of attempting to incite a coup. It doesn't change the fact that he is a serial professional liar. And completely mendacious.
Well, what's that?
And
you want to make sure he doesn't sue you.
Sue you and
I would
actually this
love
charity.
it. Can you imagine? They're going to GoFundMe support you would get to fight Trump. It would be brilliant. But I think the Telegraph's, it's a bit like the arsonist, you know, sets a fire on going, pours loads of petrol on it.
But the difficulty here, the more that people like Deborah Turness go into the BBC's offices today saying we're the most trusted broadcaster effectively in the world, the more he's got a right to sue. But also people would have trusted what they said and how they butted those clips together was entirely
yes, but
wrong.
that didn't change the it's 12, 15 seconds in a 1 hour programme a year ago, no complaints
but
about
it's not
events
just
3.5
about Trump.
years early.
Does that mean the BBC should not have... They looked into it in January,
they looked into it
in May. Should they have done anything about it, even if there were no complaints?
Yes, they should have corrected it straight away, because you don't want to give
because it's
Trump
sitting there on
ammunition.
iPlayer, being watched all the time. So it's not as though these things go out once and then they disappear. But also, it's not just about this incident. It's also about the Hamas documentary. It's about the whole of that report by Prescott, which said that, you know, there was a particularly interesting passage about how the BBC's coverage of the situation in the Middle East had been, he says it very clearly, very biased against Israel.
Yeah, but
the thing is that we have a situation in this country now where, you know, Jewish people feel concerned for their safety. We've had an attack on a synagogue. You know, the thing is, BBC is trusted. People trust the BBC. They think it is an absolute... you know, a lot of people think it's the Oracle, so it has a responsibility not to do this kind of stuff.
I think we'd be making a mistake just to take that Prescott, who was trainee journalist with him many years ago with him, to take those 19 pages as just actually the gold standard.
Just to remind people that he was on the board looking into matters of criticisms, basically.
He was on a board, not the main board.
Yes, and he wrote a memo because he was very frustrated that no action had been taken on a number of issues, and that has got leaked. And we'll come to who might have
and there was a pushback internally, particularly on the Middle East and to some extent on the trans issues, because, for instance, the BBC gets a lot of criticism over it didn't air the documentary Medics Under Attack in Gaza, which Channel 4 then showed. So yes, Jewish people and the Israeli government, some Israelis criticise the BBC, but so do a lot of British Muslims and others from another direction. And it doesn't mean you get it right when you attack from both sides, but you could see it's a very polarised conflict. There'd be terrible crimes on both sides in that war.
But that's why it's so important that the BBC is reliable in this respect, because people go to it for you know, the truth. It's the Oracle, and the thing is that is what is at the core of all of this is the fact that we have this incredible sort of institution, which is always, you know, we've all grown up with, we've always trusted it. We believe that what it says is true. A lot of people do still want, and we want to believe. We know we need something like the BBC, and yet it is, and you know, in many different small, big ways, it's letting.
I can go back to the 1970s and the Glasgow Media Group critiques of how trade unions and strikes were covered, and how it was often judged to be unfair. So you can come from the left, you can come from the right, you can come from everywhere, and the BBC is open to criticism often, and I'll be shouting at the TV and the radio when it's on. But I don't think the bias is inbuilt in any way. But it should have corrected this mistake. But it doesn't wipe out the rest of that panorama. Never mind the rest of the coverage of Trump.
I think the bias is unconscious. The bias that the BBC has, because we see that in the response to the Prescott report, where Munro said, you know, we don't think we did anything wrong doctoring that Trump speech. They don't even realise that what they're doing is not
that little clip.
So that would tell me that there is an unconscious bias there in the BBC that they don't even realise exists.
The overall impact was how Trump supporters took what he had said, is how they defended it. But we heard Max Hastings on the radio today talking effectively like a small army of right-wing publications who are after the BBC. Daily Telegraph, we've seen, Daily Mail, your paper, has often written stories that are against the BBC. I know you were personally defending it here.
I mean, I'm actually a great fan of the BBC. I mean, funnily enough, I grew up without it, so I know what it's rubbish, most of the stuff. And what the BBC produces, aside from its news coverage, is of an incredible quality. I mean, our entire culture is based around it, and that's not something that should be easily dismissed.
But what therefore is the chagrin of these publications?
I mean, our job as a newspaper, is to make sure that the BBC, which is a taxpayer-funded organisation that is based on certain principles, upholds those principles, and when it doesn't, we have to call it out. That's what everybody's doing today. It's not just us. I mean, it's all the papers are doing that.
But you got to take criticism and beware of a criticism from politicians with their own vested interests, and equally newspapers as rivals, which are coming from different political perspectives. I mean, that's how we have to view it. I mean, I think broadcasters, in fairness, not just the BBC, but Sky,
everybody,
ITV, GB News is somewhat different because it's very right wing
as well,
but you're all Ofcom regulated, and you've got to be able to sustain what you say, and you'll get things wrong. When you get things wrong, you've got to put your hands up, just as anybody does.
But I mean, Ofcom were unequivocal about the Hamas documentary, weren't they? Then their judgment. So there have been
a mistake.
There have been breaches, and the thing is, I think the BBC is getting involved. The news sort of landscape is very difficult at the moment because everyone is chasing clicks the whole time, and we have a sort of escalation of debate, and everything's so polarised, which I don't think is a good thing. And what's happened with the BBC is they've sort of somehow got involved in that, which they shouldn't have done because they're above it.
I think got involved. It was just people criticising it because they say, I follow social media. No one I know has those views you get on TV, on Sky or anywhere. That's because the only people you follow on social media are people who agree with you, and you're in your silo. And the whole point of news is trying to report facts very objectively, and say, look, these matter. And you may not like
but
all
I think
the
there's another
information.
issue here, which is that the BBC has got rid of a lot of people, a lot of very seasoned, old-fashioned journalists who were sort of in the middle tier of management. And I think what's happened is there's been a general degradation of the quality of journalism at the BBC. And I don't, Tim Davie, bless him, is not a journalist. And for them to not have a journalist as DG, I think was a fundamental mistake.
Or for him not to have a deputy who take up some of the flack, which is
you need somebody right at the top.
An editorial
it's
DG.
Not just commercial.
We don't just make this up as we go along. We actually know how to do our jobs, and good journalism is really important, and it should be at the heart of the BBC when it comes to that.
But also, a lot of the controversy is Celebrity Master Chef. Strictly Come
that's
Dancing.
yes, of course, all those things. I mean, yes.
Even Match of the Day with Gary
Edwards,
Lineker,
all of that
love Hugh Edwards,
the $1 billion is everywhere. Let's take a look at the Sun as well. Beeb's $1 billion bungle as well. The Trump lawsuit threat over lies is a strong use of language there as well. And then The Guardian talking about where did this come from and the politics behind this as well, which is interesting when you look at who might be the future Director General of the BBC as well. So this is a BBC board member with links to the Tory party.
Robbie Gibb,
who you suggested could be the leaker yourself.
I mean, he could. Well, that's what The Guardian is suggesting. I mean, it could be him, it could be Prescott himself, we don't know. It could just be someone who's crossed because the report wasn't properly circulated and they just felt it needed to be out there. I mean, let's not forget that whoever replaces Tim Davie will be appointed by this Labour government. So again, it's a political appointment, which is a strange thing. I've always thought that was an odd thing, but I don't really understand. Do you know how why that is the case?
Well, I think it's because ministers have ultimate responsibility, but I think they get recommended. I don't know if they get a name or two names. Tim Davie used to be a former Tory council candidate, but you knew where his politics were, but that wasn't kind of the problem in the end on this. Maybe it was on how he handled Gary Lineker. But what I find, right, and the Guardian is pointing the finger towards Robbie Gibb, who was Theresa May's Director of Communications, and he's on the board of the BBC. Can you imagine if Labour put Alistair Campbell on the board?
Well, they might have to. They might do that.
Robbie Gibb should not be on the board of the BBC, and Ed Davies saying, get him off. Equally...
But isn't it an appointment like that in order to...
Presumably,
there will people suggesting it's got left-wing, institutional left-wing bias.
I think the criticism, the board of the BBC has always been very left-wing.
But of course, right, we had Robbie Gibb, he's on the board, who was May's Director of Communications, and then you had and he was at the BBC originally, then you had coming from the BBC to do the same chief spin doctor's job for David Cameron, you had Craig Oliver. This idea everybody in the BBC is all left-wing is nonsense. They put up with Jeremy Clarkson, who's right at Attila the Hun
He would definitely dispute that.
For ages. I'd like to see him sue that, actually. All right, or Alan Sugar was very anti-Corbyn. And I'm not saying any of them should have been sacked, although Clarkson quite rightly was for punching a guy and being racist about him being Irish, because there wasn't a hot meal after they'd been filming. Andrew Neil, who was a brilliant interview, and I wish he was still at the BBC. Of course, he's right-wing. He's linked to the Spectator, or was chair of the Spectator, not the New Statesman. This idea the BBC is full of left-wingers are just a load of tosh.
Well, in the end,
was.
what is the impact? We've got the licence fee charter renewal coming up again.
27, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the Eye says the future of the licence fee is now in jeopardy. Well, will it be in jeopardy? Because the Labour government is less likely to make big changes, one presumes, than a Conservative government.
I think there are parallels here with the royal family. I can't see that there's any appetite to dismantle the BBC properly. I think what it needs to do is to just get its house in order and, sort of get rid of the people who've been causing these problems and just have a reset. I'm not one of the defund the BBC things. Personally, I'm very happy to pay my licence fee. I think I get quite a good value for it. I like watching Ghosts. That's my favourite BBC programme. And Antiques Roadshow. I pay the licence fee alone for the Antiques Roadshow, quite honestly. So I'm not a massive fan of Strictly, but and lots of people do love it.
Time to go through everything she
No,
watches.
no, exactly. But I do know. So I don't think
She's got time in between watching Sky News.
I think it would be mad to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
From a left perspective, though, so a progressive perspective, the licence fee is a flat rate tax on a household. So whether you've got a one-bedroom flat or a 30
but I have a plan for that.
Like Royal Lodge.
No, I have a plan for that.
Yeah,
I have a plan
you
for
pay
that.
the same.
Because it's silly, because it's a tax on the hardware, which is an old-fashioned thing. What you should be, everybody now to watch the BBC has to have a login, right? You have to have a login. So you should just pay the licence fee based on your login address, and then you can pay it once and watch it on whichever device that you want. The whole thing needs to be reformed.
You mean the way you do Netflix?
Exactly. So that's perfectly. But that's just a sort of technical thing. They could easily have done that years ago, and they just haven't bothered.
But there's a lot of people who do not watch the BBC on iPlayer and watch other streaming devices and streaming services.
Yeah, they say they don't. They say
they shouldn't have to pay for it.
But I think the BBC is worth preserving, protecting and improving.
OK. Stay there, both of you. Thank you very much for that so far. But there's more to come. Another major budget move from the Chancellor. The Guardian saying she will lift the 2-child benefit cap. More when we come back.
Eastern Libya is the new doorway to Europe for people being smuggled from Africa and Asia.
We are close to Greece. You can see it.
We've obtained unprecedented access to the authorities.
Do you feel you're just scratching the surface?
We've been on the raids, out with the Coast Guard,
Absolutely desperate.
and inside the detention centres
How did you cope with that?
to find what's pushing people to Europe and what's driving the authorities here to stop them.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, as you can see, Kevin Maguire and Sarah Vine. Let us go to budget, ... Here we go again, which is this idea of the two-child benefit cap. Looks like it's going after what Rachel Reeves has said today.
Yeah, 26th of November is the day we actually...
I mean, I don't know why the government are doing this, because it's a horrible thing that the Tories have done for them, but it's actually quite a useful thing for them, because it saves them a lot of money. So I don't know what... Maybe you can explain that...
Party management.
Yes, I don't really understand it. Because, you know, it's a nasty policy that the Tories did, and it's probably... But it's very popular with people. They quite like the idea of, have children within your means and all that kind of stuff. And it's not really going to... I don't know.
But it's the single measure that pushes most kids into poverty. And so it's the single measure, the two-child benefit cap. George Osborne brought it in. It's vile. You take it away, it'll lift most kids out.
But a lot of people would say, if you can't afford more than two children, don't have more than two children. And I would kind of...
If you pose the argument that way, you're quite right to say it, and the cap is then popular. But if you say, do you want to take kids out of poverty, then people say yes.
Yeah.
And you've got to explain
this as how... Take kids out of poverty by relying on the state.
And of course,
because you've chosen to have the child.
Yes, and of course, a lot of the people who will be saying, no, you shouldn't have a kid unless you can afford it, will be claiming their child benefit. And they will be getting the value of free nursery care. They will be getting the value of their kids in school. So they will be getting support too.
Best just have means-tested child benefit, so that the people who don't need it don't get it, and the people who do need it get it.
Well,
that's expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, but the Conservatives brought that in for higher earners, and then it was kind of, was it if you're over £60,000, somebody in your house you had over £60,000, I think was the figure, you lost it. But if you had two people next door on £59,000 each,
I lost
they would have kept it, and it was means-tested. It's always mean when you get to...
But the point is, how much is it going to cost and how's she going to pay for this?
Anyway, yes, because it's about a £3 billion cost. Gordon Brown, son of the man's moral purpose, and child poverty is argued for it. Fiscal studies have shown it. But if you're going to do that, of course, you need where you're going to get the cash from. She also gave, I thought, a big hint today that she may break the Labour manifesto promise on income tax rates, which I think would be a mistake. You can find the money... You can find the money elsewhere by taxing Sarah a bit higher, the likes of her.
Because I booked it so well.
You book.
In 10 seconds, I'm just going to show the front page of the Daily Star, which has got the Army celebs lined up. Let's be honest, we need the inside pages to have a proper good chat about it, don't we?
Well, all I would say is that Kelly Brook has repeated... That's Kelly Brook there in her bikini.
Quickly.
She's repeatedly voted the most beautiful person in the world.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.